maybe you're not resonating with this. Maybe you're listening to this and like, that's not me. I'm not experiencing that. You're not experiencing it yet. Lead a horse to water, but
leave
you
it
can't
to
make
the
the donkey
layman
drink.
to know exactly how to explain what's going on in a panic attack.
Now, this was an extreme experience at night that happened, but I use that on a regular basis. So welcome to the Mental Health Janitors, where we help you clean up the mess in your head. I'm your host, Sergeant Q, and with me as always, Doc Jess.
Hey, good afternoon. Good morning.
We have a great show for you guys today.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk, today's show is really going to center around panic and fear. How to handle it, how to be proactive, how to be defensive and resilient to the whole idea of panic and fear, and when that enters your life, however it enters your life.
And then what do you do after? How can you recover?
Perfect.
And so then we're going to share with you 3 really cool things to do that. So panic at the border. So over this last week, we had what we thought was a terrorist attack up by the border between Canada and New York, the Rainbow Crossing. And it was a vehicle that ran the checkpoint at a high rate of speed, exploded when it hit the barrier. Everybody was assuming that it was a terrorist attack because of everything that's happening in the world, with the jihad that's happening over in Israel, but with Palestine, and how those extremists have called for terrorist attacks throughout the world in support of their cause, how you see the riots and stuff happening here. We've had the war in Ukraine that has been going on for a couple of years now, plus all the domestic stuff that's happened here with some domestic terrorist attacks like in Las Vegas, and then all just the riots and looting and violence that's been happening. So everybody here is just on edge.
Well, and Aaron, I've even heard this this last week, that there's little like teenage boys going around certain towns, Auburn, Sumner, and like these teenage boys in Auburn are going around with like weapons, rifles. And they put out an alert, and like I have some single moms that live in Auburn. And so now they're starting to talk about they've actually gone and applied for their concealed weapons permit. They're going to sign up for our friend's weapons class, getting more comfortable. And so it is, the panic and the fear is surrounding us locally, globally, politically, everything.
Yeah, it feels like everybody is trying to get ready. And what I say is you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. So getting a gun and knowing how to use it, I'm a huge advocate for that. Being able to defend yourself and your family, super supportive of that.
And we'll have some really great resources for you of vetted and trustworthy local businesses that you can reach out to for some of these tools.
Right. And so don't let it be a knee-jerk reaction where, I need to go buy a gun, and then you buy one and it sits on the shelf and you never use it.
Yes.
If you're going to get this tool, then you need to learn how to be safe and proficient with it.
Yes.
So that's all I'll say about firearms. I could talk for an hour just on that. Yeah. But if you want to be prepared, then make sure that you are proficient and that you're safe with it. And that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about how this is fueling this unease. And for people who already are struggling with mental health, how it just exacerbates our PTSD.
Yeah, that's good. So when we were when we were talking pre-show and talking about this current event surrounding this couple that drove through this checkpoint, we were able to kind of unpack some of my PTSD. Our pre-show was cool because we both got to unpack a little bit of each other's PTSD. And you're going to see us do that today, which is scary for us. But it's also, I think, very helpful for anybody out there that struggles with panic, fear, PTSD, anxiety, any of that. And so when we were talking about this checkpoint incident, it brought me back to a story of when I was in the service. Operation Iraqi Freedom, 2004, 2005. I was deployed to Ramadi, Iraq. And I was a combat medic. So we ran what we call Charlie Med right there in Ramadi. And anybody who got hurt, enemy, foe, friend, came to us. And part of the Geneva Convention is we take care of everybody. We triage. And if the enemy is more hurt or wounded than a soldier, we take care of the enemy first. And that's really how it happens, or how it happened with my unit. And so we got a comms that we were having a mass casualty come in, and it was a family that drove through a checkpoint because they were illiterate. They couldn't read the caution and warning signs, and so they drove right through it, and so their vehicle got shot up. And so they came to our Charlie Med. The dad and one of the kids died on scene, but they brought the mother and her 3 infants or children that were still alive into Charlie Med. And as soon as our ER doc got the comms, he went around and pointed out all the mother medics in the room and the mother nurse and said, you guys need to go. And so we still had enough to triage and to treat, but he knew how to go through that in his mind and know that the mother medics in the room were going to emotionally attach themselves to these babies, to these kids, because we're not used to treating kids over there. And so you don't have to think about it very much, right? So they leave the room, and it's crazy that, 15 years later, 17, whatever it is, I remember that part, right? Because I'm a parent now, and I see how genius and proactive that was on his part. So we get these patients in. We have a 6-month-old, we have an 18-month-old, and we have a 4-year-old, and then we have the mother. And the mother is just, as you could imagine, confused. She just watched her husband and her son die, and her 3 babies are getting intubated and they're getting treated, and she doesn't know what's going on, and she is freaking out. It took 6 male soldiers to hold her down. And so we began to treat these infants, and that story, as we were talking about this pre-show, came right back to my mind. And Aaron even said, hey, are you comfortable? Are you okay talking about this? And I am, because I know that it's going to help somebody out there. And I'm going to have to probably put some of these tools from our toolbox to work after our show. Right. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because we're both probably going to have to use some of these tools for ourselves today.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just her talking about that, we have a similar life experience of both being deployed to Iraq. And so as she talks about that, I'm not just hearing her story, but I'm reliving the checkpoints that I visited, the firefights that I've seen, the injured people and the fear. So all of that stuff, I'm trying to relate to your story. Yeah. And so I'm not just hearing the story, but my brain is connecting to it. And so some of you are probably listening or having that same experience. Even if you weren't deployed to Iraq, maybe you have witnessed a really bad car crash, or maybe you have witnessed violence, or maybe you are a nurse. And so you've been in that emergency room when that child is coming. So your brain is trying to make connections to this story right now. So it might be touching you in a very sensitive way right now. And that is okay. That's how we communicate, and how we bond as humans is through shared experience. That's why you guys keep tuning in. That's why you guys keep listening to us, because we talk about things that you've experienced. And so it touches you and it connects us together. So that is all good. And so if you're feeling a little uncomfortable, if you got a little teary-eyed during that, it's totally okay. It's totally normal. We're going to unpack some tools for you guys to use that we use on a regular basis. And we continue to use, because I never got over my PTSD. I just learned how to deal with it better and in more constructive ways instead of destructive. And so that's what we'll get into.
And half that battle, Aaron, I don't know if you can resonate with this, is in the beginning stages of experiencing those PTSD symptoms and then getting diagnosed with it. And then for me, wrestling with this pity party of, I shouldn't have to deal with this. This isn't my fault. And so just trying to compartmentalize it and say, I don't deserve these symptoms. I didn't do this to myself. And so I'm not going to work on it. Right. And then I just spiral worse and worse and worse down until you've said it before, until you take ownership of your own mental health growth. you're going to keep spiraling. And so it was when I took ownership of my own mental health growth, found a good counselor, and started building my mental health resiliency. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I literally thought you were going to G.I. Joe me there.
G.I. Joe, yeah.
Knowing is half the battle.
Yeah. I do that a lot.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
No, but that was really good. You have to take responsibility. So if this touched you in a way, that's showing that maybe you have some trauma that maybe you haven't dealt with. Maybe you need to talk to somebody about, and that's okay. I go to therapy. Jess goes to therapy. She is a therapist. She sees how valuable it is. So she wanted to become a therapist to help other people. So it's totally normal. Well, and totally okay.
And coming off some of the recent episodes about family trauma, family dysfunction, that is trauma.
And the last thing I'll say about it is that, maybe you're not resonating with this. Maybe you're listening to this and like, that's not me. I'm not experiencing that. You're not experiencing it yet. Part of this human condition means that you are going to experience trauma at some point in your life. And if you say, oh, well, it didn't affect me, that's 100% not true. It affects everybody. That's like getting hit by a car and saying, oh, it didn't affect me. Just because it didn't break your leg, it's still some bruising there. Yeah. It's still going to give you some apprehension crossing the street. Everybody's going to get hit by the freight train of mental health at some point in their life. So if you're not experiencing this now, you will. So it's still good to learn these skills so you can pass them on to your friends and family or use them yourself.
Yeah. Or just understand if you have somebody in your life that you care about that has maybe a higher level of experienced trauma, like how their brains work and what they struggle with and how they go through things.
Okay, so we're kind of going to go out of order on this. We're going to talk about what do we do after a panic attack. And so a lot of times with me, when I got done with it, I would just sleep for a while and then try to forget about it. But there are some major physiological things that happen to you, not just mentally, but physically during a panic attack that you need to deal with and treat to help you recover faster. And so during a panic attack, your body's going to get hit with a tremendous amount of cortisol and adrenaline. And those chemicals are not just going to be stuck in your brain, because they will be, but they're also going to be stuck in your major muscle groups. And so, Jess, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and then what do we do after?
Sure. So there's also a pretty common saying as the panic attack hangover.
Yes.
And so you can literally feel physically like you were hit by a bus. Your muscles can be sore. You can have a headache, right? And depending on how well you take care of your body before the panic attack can also affect how you feel after the panic attack, as well as what you do during the panic attack. And we'll get into that. But one of the things for that research shows, and my own personal research has shown to be an incredible help, is massage therapy after a panic attack, or even massage therapy during a heightened stressful time to help prevent a panic attack. And there's those cortisol levels and the adrenaline and the tensing of your muscles all play a role in how you feel and how you can deal with stressful situations. And so getting massage therapy to be proactive against panic attacks research has shown has been incredible, and also the recovery time of that panic attack hangover. And it doesn't have to be a deep tissue, or, there's been times I've even gone to like a Chinese reflexology walk-in, a safe one. Disclaimer, I have some really great safe ones that are not sketchy, and it's $45 for a 1 hour foot massage, but they actually massage your whole body head to toe with your clothes on. And then they spend about 25-30 minutes on your feet on these pressure points that really help realign your nervous system and get you to a place to be able to relax a little bit more. But I always would suggest a licensed massage therapist first and foremost. And then times that they're not available because sometimes they don't have a walk-in basis. That's the Chinese reflexology can be a really good backup.
And so what happens when those chemicals are released in your body? Your brain says, oh, there is danger here, so we need to get you prepared to run or fight. So it pumps a tremendous amount of adrenaline and cortisol into your major muscle groups so you can fight harder or run faster or run longer. That's what it's doing. So all of that goes in your muscle fibers, and your muscle fibers kind of look like this, right? And so when it pushes that in there, it clogs up all of that muscle tissue. So you maybe experience this when you run for a long time, and then all of that lactic acid gets in those muscle groups and your muscles feel sore afterwards. Very similar experience with these chemicals. And so you have to flush that out of the system. So drinking a lot of water and massaging those major muscle groups. If you can get in to see a massage therapist, and we both have the same one, and she is amazing. Stephanie is incredible. And if you're local, we'll put her link in the bottom and you guys can check her out. She's incredible. But what that does is it breaks down all of that chemical, and it starts pushing it out of those major muscle groups. And then the water just helps flush that out of your system. The other thing that you can do, if you can't get in to see a massage therapist, or maybe you don't feel comfortable people touching you, totally fine. I get that. You can get these rollers and just roll out the major muscle groups like you would after a workout.
Yep.
And so there's these foam rollers you can get on Amazon. They're like $15. You can have one of those, roll out the major muscle groups, and that will start to increase the recovery time or decrease the recovery time.
We can look up a good, like reputable or researched video to help show you how to roll.
Yeah, that's important.
I'm sitting here laughing as you're explaining this because I realize that's what you wanted me to talk about. How it affects.
That's all right. It's okay.
So
you can lead a horse to water, but
leave
you
it
can't
to
make
the
the
layman to know exactly how to explain what's going on in a panic attack.
That's why this works so well. That's why it works so well. I interpret Jess. I interpret these big science terms into little bite-sized pieces.
I didn't even use science terms. I just explained my experience with how it helps me with zero like medical or bio engineered. I don't know. Your big words, not mine.
That's why this works so well.
That was a really good explanation, though, of how it happens in your body that I can now articulate better in the future when asked.
That's how it works.
Instead of, my body tenses up. I don't know what to do. Yeah. I call Aaron. What's happening in my body right now? Oh, yes. Okay. Quarters. Okay. Got it.
Those chemicals too, they're in your brain, and we're not going to deep dive into this. We'll do it in another podcast, but those chemicals also coat the synapses in your brain, those receptors. And so if you do experience a trauma, something, a rape, a robbery, a bad car accident, something that's causing you to have anxiety or causing you to have disturbed sleep or intrusive thoughts, go see a therapist early and often. If you can get in within the first 6 months of that trauma experience, your time it takes to recover from that is going to be shortened. Now, if you wait longer than that, the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to try and unpack that. And what you're really trying to do is get that cortisol away from those synapses in the brain so it can function regularly.
Yeah.
And we'll get into a whole episode about it. But just know, if you do experience a trauma, go early, go often to therapy. Yeah,
it's just like a physical injury.
Right.
The scar tissue is going to start building up on that knee that you hurt. Mm-hmm. And the longer you wait, the more it's going to hurt and the harder it's going to be to recover.
So we talked about what to do after massage therapy. Use that. You can use it before, but use it after having one of these panic attacks. So let's talk about what can we do in the moment, Jess? What can we do if we start to experiencing these thoughts, feelings, or emotions and feeling out of sorts? What can we do to automatically stop that? And so we watched a really cool video on this. We'll share with you guys, and then Jess will unpack it.
Therapist told me to eat a Warhead whenever I'm feeling a panic attack coming on.
Oh my God, I'm so glad this video popped up in my feed because I thought I was the only therapist that was recommending this to clients. So here is why the infamous Warhead treatment actually is legit and works. Your brain can only handle one emergency at a time. So if you give your brain a new emergency to worry about, then it has to focus on that instead of the thing that you're panicking about. So believe it or not, intense temperatures or sour or spicy foods will give you a new emergency and therefore let go of that anxious panic thought that you're having. So here's your excuse to go buy a bunch of fireballs, warheads, super strong mints, whatever you need to get through your day and decrease those panic attacks instantly. Be safe, y'all. Have a great holiday with family. Wink, wink.
So we watched this video. It's really cool. This is what we do. We're nerds. This is what we do. We study the brain and all these techniques all the time. So we're constantly, everything we do, looking on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, research studies. It's all about mental health. And so we found this. And the moment I watched this video, I was like, oh my gosh, of course that works. I understand why it works. It was incredible. So break it down, Jess. What did you think of this video when you first watched it?
Right. Well, it's what I love about it is it's the original creator talking about how that Warhead helps her in her panic attacks, and then the therapist, licensed therapist, whatever, duels the video and is like, yes, I'm so glad she's doing this. And as a therapist, I've never heard of this. I've never tried it myself as a client or patient, and I've never recommended it. And so I had the same reaction to you as like, that makes total sense, right? Mm-hmm. Because we talk about other things that we can do in the midst of a panic, anxiety, or PTSD attack. And we can unload those at another podcast. What's the difference? Because I do believe there's a difference. But in one of these crisis modes, we've talked a lot about grounding, and from your book, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yep.
And that one I love the most because the ending is the taste. And that taste, even if it's water, gum, a warhead, a hot tamale, that research has shown that stops whatever's going on and realigns your body from, you explained it really well one time, from the fight or flight to...
So what happens is you're stuck, when you're in that panic mode, you're stuck in this subconscious loop of fear.
Yep.
Because you're not experiencing reality anymore. What you're really doing is reliving that past trauma. And so you're really detached from what is happening in reality because the subconscious mind has taken over at that point. So the goal is to get the conscious mind back online, to get out of that subconscious loop. And so there are things that you can do as you start to get into that mode to prevent it from going full panic attack. But if you get into that mode, it's super hard to now rationalize to get yourself out. It takes a friend or family member. And so I train the police how to do this when they're talking to somebody who's just experienced a trauma and they need a witness statement from them, and they're kind of all over the place. They're not getting good information. If they can do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with them, bring them back to reality, they're going to get a lot better information. They're going to de-escalate situations a lot faster. So that taste is so important, because when you taste something super sour or super hot or whatever that intense flavor is, like even intense mint, whatever that intense flavor is, it forces your brain to go back to the conscious mode, because there is a new fear or a new problem that it needs to solve. It's trying to solve an old problem, that panic attack, stuck in that subconscious loop. So when you introduce a new crisis, this citric acid is burning my tongue, I need to figure out why and stop it. Yeah. Or this hot tamale is hot cinnamon, or this hot pepper is too hot. That's a new emergency that the brain has to solve.
So you hijack that crisis mode of that panic attack. Right.
Well, your brain is being hijacked by the amygdala, by the crisis. And so what you're doing is you're taking the power back. You're rescuing the hostage, which is your own brain.
Right.
Is what
That's
you're doing.
Really good way to put it.
So this is like throwing a flashbang into a room where there's hostages. You're not going to hurt the hostages, but you're going to disorient the terrorist, and you'll be able to take them down. That's what's happening in your brain. That subconscious loop is the terrorist that's hijacking your amygdala and taking it hostage. And so you, by throwing this warhead in, or this hot tamale or something spicy, you are throwing a flashbang into your brain, bringing the conscious mind back online, so then you can take better control of the situation and be able to move forward in a positive way. Yeah. I hope that makes sense to you guys.
And a lot of you guys are going to take this and run with it and be like, oh, the mental health janitors told me to eat candy.
Right. Your dentists are going to hate me. But try it. Just keep, I have gum in my car all the time. all the time. I have gum in my car. And so this is just something I do because I know it helps me. And then when I watched this video, I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. I do this, and didn't even recognize why I was doing it. I just did it because it worked. And then once I saw that and she broke it down, I was like, that's why I do this. This works perfectly.
Yeah. And for those of you that know me, I always have a water bottle. Always. 95% of the time, I have one of my water bottles. And yes, my husband says I have a water, but really, I always want to have access to have my own water bottle because I use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that taste always I use sipping the water and thinking, okay, the water is cold, it's going down my throat, and that helps me realign. And so having a Warhead or a Sour Patch Kid or something is just an additional tool. And so I really love the idea of this new tool.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it would be interesting to see how this would work with parenting, Jess. Like when your kid is having a meltdown, be able to get them back out of that emotional state by using something, like this. Be curious to find out if there's any research around that. Dye-free
alternative to Warhead.
I wasn't sure where we were going with that. Dye-free. I was like, is this
dye-free, like red therapy?
Red dye-free. Yes. No, I just meant something that would shock their system, not shock as in like electrocute, but shock their system out of that emotional state when they're having that meltdown to be able to bring them back to a conscious state of mind.
Yeah. Well, even thinking of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, walking through that with a kid, we should have a really easy tool for people to print out.
I know you do a parenting class.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something you could add into the parenting class.
Yeah.
And then if people want to learn how to do that and work with your kids and get them out of that emotional state, see Doc Jess. She does these classes all the time. You can find the links here on our page, the Mental Health Janitors. There'll be some links also in the description, how you can contact Jess and get into one of these parenting classes. Change your life. So we've talked about what to do after, which is the massage therapy, what to do during, which is one of these grounding techniques, and trying to use some of these hot or sour candies to bring your conscious mind back online. And so let's talk a little bit about what you can do before. In the military, we did a tremendous amount of training before we ever went into combat. And we're going to show you how training and being prepared for these incidents are going to help you be more successful when they happen.
50% of Americans say that they or a loved one have suffered from mental health crisis. Together, we can change all that. Introducing QActual, a revolutionary new peer-to-peer based mobile application. Personalized to fit your lifestyle, with pinpoint GPS location in times of emergency. Connecting you to your care provider. With QActual, we will move you forward. Download QActual now and visit QActual.com.
Okay, so let's talk about being prepared. In the military, we spend a tremendous amount of time training for combat. We would spend months and sometimes years training for that 30 to 45 seconds or that 3 to 5 minutes worth of intense combat to stay alive. And so we can do that same type of thing with our mental health. So what are some things that you do, Jess, to help you be prepared for when these hard mental health days come?
Sure. Well, and there's different, aspects I can talk about, but knowing the anniversary effects, knowing that certain time of the year where I lost 3 close friends on the same day to the same IED bomb, March 4th, June, there's different days that come around that I know I need to be preparing for. Right. And so Memorial Day, super hard for me. I stay off social media because people don't mean to be offensive, but I can't wait for my 3-day barbecue weekend. And they have no idea what they're celebrating. And it does. It rubs me the wrong way. And so I just know they don't mean it, but I need to stay away from it. So there's things that I've learned over the years to be prepared and be proactive. I also am a regular massage kind of person because I've seen how well that helps me. I go in my infrared sauna. I do things to prepare myself for those heightened traumatic times of my life. And I also remain in counseling a little bit more when those times come. But I'm also prepared with weighted blankets. If I'm having a PTSD attack, both of my dogs are trained service dogs to give me weighted pressure. When I need it, they can feel my anxiety rising before I even really notice it.
Well,
and
they don't actually feel it. They smell it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. They can smell it. They can sense it. Right. And so I know that I need to start checking in with myself with my emotional thermometer and my different tools when one of them comes and starts leaning on me, because they don't do it all the time.
Right.
And so those are just a few things that I do to prepare myself and to be proactive to have less PTSD attacks. But in those PTSD attacks, my first go-to is I call my husband, and he stops whatever he's doing. If he's at work, he comes home and he's my weighted pressure, and he prays over me and he holds me and he lays on me sometimes and helps me through that, gets me water, helps me do some grounding techniques. And so not everybody has a partner like that can do that. And so it would be really interesting to kind of converse with you about some alternatives for people that don't have that.
Yeah, so I've trained myself to use something that I used in the military, which is stop, look, and listen.
Perfect.
And I write about this in my book. This is one of the techniques that I developed early on in my mental health journey as I was researching this stuff and learning it, and I developed this. And I really went back and looked at my military training, and I looked at PTSD as if it was an enemy. And so how do I fight an enemy? I started using these same military tactics I would against the enemy, against this PTSD, as if it was a real physical enemy. And these things really worked. So stop, look, and listen is something that we would use when we got to a danger area. So in Anglico, we're a small team, 5 to 6 guys, and we patrol out on a firepower control team. Not a lot of backup for us. We'd usually parachute in. So if you get compromised, there's really nobody coming to help you. The best thing you can do is call for fire on your position and then run like hell.
Yeah.
So we had to be very cautious of every danger area that we got near. So a danger area would be like crossing a road, crossing an open field, something like that. So what we would do is when we'd get there, we would stop. Everybody would be quiet, and you would just stop, look, and listen. So stop everything else we're doing. We would look around at our surroundings. Did we notice anything out of the ordinary, anything of concern, footprints, drag marks, IEDs, tripwires, anything that looked out of the ordinary? And then we would listen to our body. What was our body telling us? Was this real fear or perceived fear? Was there something in our environment that we were noticing that makes us uneasy about crossing in this space? If it was, then we would move down farther and cross in a different area if time and tactics permitted.
So good.
And I do that same thing now with my mental health. So here's a great example. This weekend, I woke up at 2:05 in the morning to the sound of 6 to 8 rapid, high-powered rifle shots going off. I live out in the middle of the country in Enumclaw, and even farther in the country than that, deep in the woods. But I heard that. And so I woke up to the sound of these rapid 6 to 8 gunshots. And immediately I went into alert mode. Like I could feel that adrenaline, cortisol just burst into my heart and course through my body. And I'm laying there. I used to just get up, throw my kid on, grab my flashlight, and I'd be outside patrolling my property looking for the enemy. Because instantly my brain was telling me that we were under attack. But I didn't do that. I told myself to stop. And I wanted to see what was actually happening. The rounds that I heard sounded like they were far away. They weren't right out my door. They were at a distance. And they were probably at a greater distance because I figured they were probably within a quarter mile. But sound travels a lot better at night. So it could have been farther. After those 6 to 8 rounds went off, I heard a huge explosion that literally shook my house. So that tells me it was pretty close if that explosion shook my house. So again, when the explosion goes off, my brain was that an incoming mortar? Is this a terrorist attack? Is this a Red Dawn moment, right? Is one of my neighbors under attack? Like all of those things start going through my brain because it wants to preserve life. And so it's urging me to get up, get my kit, and go check it out. But I didn't do that. My conscious mind was able to hold still because I was stop, look, and listen. I stopped what I was doing. I looked at my surroundings and I listened to my body. And every one of those times that panic popped something up like it's a mortar, I said, no, there's nobody out here with mortars. So mortars is off the table. Well, is this a terrorist attack? Well, what kind of terrorist attack would be happening in the middle of the woods in Enumclaw, Washington at 2 a.m? Okay, so that's not a real possibility. Is it a Red Dawn moment? Probably not. Because again, who would invade Enumclaw, Washington? Not a real possibility. So I was able to rationalize each of those things by doing this stop, look, and listen technique. And what I was able to come up with, I still don't know what actually happened, but my best guess is that this is a Saturday night, the Friday after Black Friday. So what probably happened is some redneck in Enumclaw, there was a sale on tannerite and ammo. Okay. He had a couple beers Friday night and decided to shoot his rifle at a can of tannerite at 2 a.m. Why? Because he could, because it's America.
And Enumclaw. In the middle of the woods.
Middle of the woods. Rednecks everywhere. So that's probably more likely what happened, because after that explosion, there were no more gunshots, no more explosions, no ambulances, no police officers, no helicopters, nothing. And so I was able to walk myself back through that and rationalize each one of those irrational fears that came up, those intrusive thoughts that came up. I was able to say, no, that's not a real possibility, and push it to the side, and push it to the side, and push it to the side. So that's something that I've learned to do. It has not been easy, but man, it has been worth it, because I will have that. I will use that on a regular basis, sometimes just going into the grocery store where I feel uneasy.
Yeah.
And I will do the stop, look, and listen, where I literally just stop in the aisle. I'll look at my surroundings and listen to my body and figure out what the heck is going on. Why do I feel that way?
Yeah.
Now, this was an extreme experience at night that happened, but I use that on a regular basis. So those are one of the things that I do. I have a plan for when these things happen. What am I going to do? How am I going to execute? In the military, we did it all the time. Near ambush left, everybody knew they were going to turn left, return fire, and move toward the objective, which is different than the Army. I think you guys retreat, but in the Marines, we just push forward. But that's what we do. You don't have to think about it.
You just lost a ton of followers. Thanks, Aaron.
Hey, you Army guys know it's the truth. It's fine. It's fine. We love you guys. But that's what we do. We prepare for when those emergencies happen. We don't have to think about what to do. We just go back to our training. So think about that. Use these grounding techniques, take these things that we're teaching you, and create your own battle plan. So when you're experiencing one of these things, you don't have to think about what am I going to do. You're just executing the plan.
Yeah. And so much has been brought to my mind just hearing your story, right? And, you know, in the Army, we all go to basic training to learn basics, yep. Right? And then when I was deployed, right, females weren't allowed on the front lines of war, and they brought the Lioness team in, right? But before I could go on the front lines of war for my 2-week rotations, they took us, you know, 4 or 6 selected females out into the remote desert to teach us advanced hand-to-hand combat, to teach us to get comfortable on every weapon. So I got to shoot a 50 cal and other weapons that other medics were never like trained to use, and to prepare for frontline combat that I hadn't been exposed to before, right? Because it wasn't an option for a female to engage in like actual combat, just more support roles, right? And so even though we experienced tons of mortars on Charlie Med, and a lot of people died from those mortars, going out and doing the raids and doing the checkpoints was a different kind of combat that they had to prepare me for. And so the such great analogies, Sergeant Q, to help. Hopefully we get a really good veteran following, because we those shared experiences, right? But those metaphors and those analogies really, really help.
They resonate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why that shared experience is so important. And so we talk about that with the team dynamic, finding friends that have a shared life experience who you can trust with your mental health journey. And with you guys can do that mentality together. Yeah. That squad mentality is super, super important, right?
Which is why the app is so incredible, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Q Actual is our sponsor here, and the app that we developed is incredible. It's based on that squad dynamic. It has those grounding techniques in it. It has a single button push, so when your brain is malfunctioning, you don't have to think about who am I going to call, what am I going to say. You execute the plan, which is to push one button. It sends an alert to your friends. They can directly communicate with you. It also turns on your GPS so they can navigate to your position if you can't articulate where you're at, or they can dispatch emergency services to come help you. All of those things were built in the technology. They were built by combat veterans for veterans, and now has been rolled out for the greater society, because we as veterans, we don't have a monopoly on mental health trauma.
Nope.
Right? We're just one sector of that.
Yep.
But the things that we've learned here in the veteran community, we're now putting out into the civilian sector and having amazing results.
Yeah.
So if you guys are interested in that, you can download it for free. There's a free version in there. There's also a paid version if you want to get some more assets that are available. And we're continually building assets as we go. Doc Jess has been working on a set of assets that's going to go in there for you guys to help you with your mental health journey. So that's our plug for Q Actual. We have that available. Check it out. Tell us what you think of it.
Another thing that I was thinking of when you were asking, what I do before, right? I actually had a really good friend reach out to me this last week and say, hey, I'm really struggling, teetering a panic attack, reach out to me. And my go-to when you're like preparing for that panic attack is the meditation on the Word of God. So for me, I sent her a Christian mindfulness body scan. And so that mindfulness really builds up that resiliency in that frontal cortex of your mind to be able to get back into reality as well. The more you practice that mindfulness, the more resiliency you're going to build and be able to, because what you're doing in this body scan, and we've talked about it before, is the specific one I use is it uses scripture and it uses praise and thanksgiving to the Lord for different parts of our body and honing in to those different parts of our bodies to realize where we're feeling this in our body. And that helps that negative cycle also realign to really the reality of what's going on. Okay. So Sergeant Q, we talked about it a lot today.
Yes.
And as we were talking, we're going to be able to put into this mindful eating or this mindfulness into another episode. So make sure you stay tuned for when that's going to happen, because it'll be fun to watch that. But today we really was centered around panic and fear, right? We talked about what to do before, during, and after. And we kind of went backwards. What to do after with massage therapy, what to do during is the grounding techniques, the tools for the toolbox of eating something or the grounding techniques that we've given you before. And then also what to do before a panic attack and how to be proactive. And so I hope what we talked about today educated you, helped empower you, and then encourages you to use it for yourself and share it with your friends. Thanks so much for joining in with us today. I'm Doc Jess.
And I'm Sergeant Q. And we're out.